we're doing CPR actively on a child or an individual, and that's done, whatever the outcome is, and I have to walk right back down the hall and go walk into rooms and talk to parents and take care of kids and swab them and act like nothing ever happens.
Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of HuMed. I'm Dr. David Spiro. I'm a professor and attending physician at Arkansas Children's Hospital, and I am incredibly delighted to have Ryan Kalusik with us here today, who is a partner of mine as a paramedic and a nurse now. I guess you're both in some ways, and just got to know him personally, and this journey of HuMed, human medicine, is really about learning what we do in healthcare, and doctors cannot operate alone. We have nurses and paramedics. We work as a team to care for the children. We all have different roles and overlapping roles, and incredibly honored to have you on the show, Ryan, and would love for you to just give our listeners a quick overview of how you got here.
Appreciate the opportunity. It's an honor to be on here and to kind of, I love your idea and what you guys are doing and be able to kind of be a part of that and expand on it. But my name's Ryan. Grew up in a small town in Arkansas, was a multi-sport athlete. Joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. I was Marine Corps infantry. I did 2 tours. Came back home after that. Struggled.
2 tours.
I was on the 15th and the 11th MU. We did a lot of joint ops training all over the country. We were in the Middle East. We were we spent a lot of time in the Philippines, Burma, did a lot of cross training with foreign militaries. We were responsible for training them and then building just diplomatic relationships with them. So spent time in the Middle East, off the coast of Africa, been all over the world. It was a pretty awesome experience.
You had a little bit of a trauma. Was it a hard job?
Yeah, I mean, Marine Corps infantry, we're America's 911. So the unique thing about the Marine Corps is we can be deployed anywhere, fully capable in 24 hours. So all throughout the world, there's Marines on patrol, all over the world. And it was a lot, war, combat, the tactics, the things that went into it was, I got to see, the worst of humanity, you war and to see what the consequences of that were and what it did. It was hard on me. I got friends that, weren't as fortunate as me. I got friends that are still to this day incredibly debilitated by, PTSD, depression, and it was a whole different journey, but that was my first initial, I guess, encounter with, trauma and the human experience of life and death and a lot of the things that me and you, we see, unfortunately, a lot.
So how did you end up at Arkansas Children's Hospital?
So after I got out of the Marine Corps, I struggled a little bit, just being transparent, honestly, with my mental health. It took me a minute to figure out what I wanted to do. I enrolled at Arkansas State University, was actually pre-med, and then switched over to exercise science physiology, got a bachelor's, opened up a gym. No matter what I did, I always felt a pull to medicine and, that sort of career, and I ended up going and becoming an EMT in Jonesboro for Emerson Ambulance Service, and then I became a paramedic and got hired on as a firefighter paramedic at Jacksonville outside of Little Rock, and that was a tremendous experience as far as overall trauma, emergency medicine. It was amazing. Got to see a whole lot of everything, and then from there, one of my coworker, my captain, actually worked at Children's. He was a paramedic for a while, and he became a nurse, and I just kind of really appealed to me. I wanted to do that. It was a goal of mine, so I've started working as a paramedic and saved up money and worked my way through. Had a lot of people that helped me along the way, very grateful for that, but helped me get from paramedic to RN, and I transitioned to an RN position at the beginning of this year, and I've just been kind of rocking and rolling since then. So,
well, we're really lucky to have you, and that's quite a background. So, and I will say this multiple times, maybe during the podcast, but thank you for your service. I think that those of us that have never been in the military, just like not being a doctor, not being a nurse, I have zero idea outside of watching movies and talking to folks. And, the military is such an important part of who we are to defend our country and the values that we hold dearly. And, people like you literally put your life on the line. And I have the deepest respect for that. So I would love to hear your story. When we first talked a little bit about it, I shared a little bit of what human medicine was all about, and I don't know what your story is, and would love to hear it. We don't talk about any kind of personal health information, but would love to hear a little bit about what you want to share today.
There's a couple things come to mind when I think about, again, obviously my background. I guess in a sense you could say I've kind of had a traumatic background. I mean, joining the military out of high school, you experience, a lot of, human emotions, trauma, any kind of war fighting, any of that stuff is pretty. It's interesting because I think we can all say, with 100% certainty that no one's created to see some of the things that we see and do the things that we do. And I've had a couple, people tend to think Arkansas, country, whatever, but Arkansas Children's is a massive hospital. It's, we're level 1. We see, we have travel nurses that come in and they're like, I've never seen this kind of stuff. And I've been all over. We had a huge, spike in that gang activity a few years ago where we were having GSWs and stuff coming in like, nonstop left and right. And it was, to see.
GSW, by the way, is a gunshot wound. GSW.
We saw a lot of those kids come in and, whether it was minor or pretty major, and to see the effect that it had on families, and to see the two stories that really come to mind for me was, there was a moment where, the situation did not go the way any of us would hope, and the individual did not make it.
So this was a gunshot wound?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And the dad was just, beside himself, and, started falling everywhere and stuff like that. And I just felt, our words. I went out and, I kind of picked him up and held him, and we walked outside, and he was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And, I found this being something that I actually, experienced a lot more since then. But this was my first real big, experience at Children's, to see this happen and to see the pain. And in that moment, what was really cool to me was, this was if you were to traditionally see me and, this guy out in public, we probably would not associate with each other at all. But in that moment, that barrier was completely gone. It was just two humans, one that, had tried to help and one that had lost something. And it was just this moment where we connected as men. And, I had his arm around him, and I walked outside with him out the front of the hospital and just stood out there with him for a minute while he cried and he was screaming. And, we walked back in. And those moments, resonated and stuck with me because it's in most cultures and cultures around the world, especially, it's considered an honor to be there for a birth or to be there for a death. It's a huge honor that's, very few, like a select people are selected for. So, to be part of that process and to be a part of that human experience where you're seeing these emotions and you're seeing we were just people. He wasn't dad, I wasn't the paramedic, I wasn't whatever. We were just two humans that were experiencing something together, and we connected over that. I've never seen him since then, but I know when he walked out of there, he walked over to me and put his hand on my neck and was like, thank you. But thank you for being there. And again, this is an individual, I won't go into detail, that if you saw us out, we would have no affiliation with each other whatsoever. And so to see that barrier crossed, it was really resonated for me. And, the other side of it was the way we process this. We kind of, a lot of things people don't understand is we are in those situations frequently. Especially now that I'm a nurse, I will be in a code. We're doing CPR actively on a child or an individual, and that's done, whatever the outcome is, and I have to walk right back down the hall and go walk into rooms and talk to parents and take care of kids and swab them and act like nothing ever happened. So you learn how to kind of push that down, or you just kind of compartmentalize it. And I've had multiple times where days later it just hits me.
How does it hit you?
I've cried. I saw a little girl in Dollar General, and her hair was real long, and it reminded me, I just saw someone's face, and I walked out to my car and just started crying. I've had moments with my own kids where I'll remember something, or I'll, it really comes and goes. And sometimes it's just absolute silence where I drive all the way to work and there's nothing there. A lot of times I don't really, I'm careful about talking about it with my loved ones. I'll talk about it with my coworkers. That's something we do therapeutically. We'll talk back and forth about things. But the one that got me recently was we had another, pediatric code. So we were doing CPR and stuff, and the outcome was not what we had hoped.
And a code, and just so everyone in the audience knows, a code is when a child comes into the ER and their heart is not beating on it by itself. So, and that's what most people consider code, and I'm assuming that's what Ryan's talking about. But, CPR, someone's pushing on their chest, someone's breathing for them, and they're clinically dead. And our job is to try to revive them and resuscitate them. So, Ryan, was that what was happening in this case?
It was, and that's another, kind of hard part about what we do too is, we're in there, we're kind of guardians at the gate. If you'll say, we're doing everything we can to give that child the best chance at life, and we're fighting an uphill battle. As you know, it's an uphill battle from the very beginning, and a lot of times the outcome is not, what we would love it to be, and that is something that never leaves. You carry every single one of them. I carry every cry, every scream from a parent, every drop of blood, every, the memory, it never leaves. And I feel like the moment as a nurse when it hit me really hard was a few months ago when we had that same process, and it was all said and done, and no one is ready for the quiet that comes at the end when we terminate resuscitation efforts. So when that happens, there's just this deafening quiet where we all kind of calm down, and then usually, you'll hear the cries of the family, and that's, those things just echo in my head. They never leave. But the one that particularly got me more than anything was after it was all said and done, the coroner comes up, and as I was walking by the trauma bay, the coroner was going to move the baby that was in the body bag, and when she moved it over, like she set it down, I heard the thud of the body kind of hit the metal gurney. And she didn't drop it or anything. It was just the process. Like, it made this sound, and it crushed me. I mean, I just sat there and just thought about how many times we have fought this battle, and the resiliency that we have to show as a team, as professionals, to keep coming back and keep fighting when we know most of the time we're not going to get that win. And so learning ways to creatively express that and carry that, and sometimes that's talking with my coworkers, sometimes it's prayer, sometimes it's reading, and sometimes it's just silence or me just randomly, crying it out, just to let it out. But I know that, I call it echoes, and it continues to echo, and I don't know if it'll ever, stop. And I hope that I always continue to feel this, because I feel like the day that I don't feel it anymore is probably a day I need to reevaluate what I'm doing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm just curious, you have so many different interesting facets of your life and your background, from military to being a paramedic in the field, and then being a paramedic in the ER. And for those of you that don't know, we have different people doing different things, and more emergency departments, adult and pediatric, are hiring awesome people like Ryan to be a part of our team as a paramedic. 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of almost, and now was doctor, nurse, and now we have nurse practitioners and all sorts of people with different backgrounds. But Ryan, you just finished, and congratulations. It's like a huge commitment, working full time. I know that you're a dad, you've got children, you went to nursing school while you were doing all those things. But my question is, what has changed or what has not changed now that you're a nurse versus when you were working? Same job, and not same job, but same institution, Arkansas Children's. You had a role as a paramedic, now you have a role as a nurse. How is it different for you when you're dealing with these really difficult codes?
We see a lot in the field, and we're able to bring a unique experience, but ultimately the responsibility of a lot of times communicating with the family, educating the family, doing more interaction, some of the charting, some of the assessments and stuff, those are more extensive as a nurse. So as a paramedic, a lot of times I could come in, kind of do my thing, help, and then I'm out, off to go do whatever else. Whereas a nurse, if that's my patient, that's my responsibility from start to finish. And, it's different because it's now, that is my patient, my responsibility. It's no longer, I'm going in, I'm helping, and I'm leaving. So there's the educational piece, and also just the communication with the family is a much more, expansive, because, if I'm discharging them or I'm going over medication stuff with them, it's my job to educate them and say, hey, here's what you're doing at home. Here's what you need to be, watching for and stuff like that. So I feel like it's kind of like I get to be the cool teenager as a paramedic, and then I have to be a parent as a nurse. I have to kind of be the one that kind of does a little bit more. So both tremendous roles, and they're incredibly valuable, and we need both extensively. And I encourage people, if you're a paramedic, it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. You bring a lot of unique experience to nursing, and I enjoy it. But there's a lot more responsibility as a nurse, and ultimately it becomes my responsibility. So that's where I feel like the biggest difference was for me.
Yeah, because you think about it, like Nurse Nightingale, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and the idea of the nursing profession is really to provide another layer of comfort and care that physicians are a little bit. We do that too, but it's a different role, and I appreciate that, and I also appreciate this moment you described, because right while we're doing CPR and we're breathing for the child, there's a lot of, not necessarily noise, but there could be 15 or 20 people in the room, all having their role in trying to save a child's life. And typically the doctor will say something like, we've done this, sort of recaps everything that we've done, and then says, does anyone else have anything left that they want to do? And I think everyone who's done this a bunch of times knows that means it's near the end. And ultimately, we have that moment. It's funny, I've never thought about it before, but there is that moment, Ryan, that you described when we declare death, and then there's just silence. And then right after that silence, there is usually a pretty intense reaction from the family. And unfortunately, we've all had these moments, and I don't know about you, but we see the most common form of the most common age of children coming in with cardiac arrest are infants, sudden infant death syndrome, or something of this nature. I don't know about your experience, but for me, seeing an older child die is harder. And it shouldn't be, but have you experienced that? Does it feel different to you when it's an older child versus a newborn?
It's hard not to kind of give a response and not sound kind of, I'm not going to say cold, but it's almost, I'll be honest, sometimes you're doing this and they just look like little dolls. They look so peaceful, and it's, maybe in my mind, I tell myself, they just went to sleep, they're dreaming, and that's what they're going to do for the rest of whatever their existence is. They're dreaming, whereas you have a teenager or someone older that has already got to experience life. Because you think about a baby, a child, the first time they experience light or taste or walk or swim or all those things, those are massive experiences in our life, and they change you, emotionally, mentally, physically. And to have experienced all that and still get snatched, away younger, I feel like it is a lot harder, because you do think about those things, especially whether it's a drowning or a gunshot wound or a horrible car accident or something. These are, it's not that one life is more valuable than the other, but there was more life that was lived, and they got to experience these things, and it was cut short. Whereas I feel like there's this innocence in the child that, they're just dreaming, they're a little baby, and they're dreaming. That's kind of how I've planted it in my brain, I guess, to maybe help me process it, because I'm gonna be honest with you, and I know you probably feel the same way. There is nothing like seeing a dead baby for the first time, or the second, or the third, or however many at this point we've all seen. But every single time, to me, that's just the one thing that every time I'll sit there and we call it. They say, hey, we're terminating resuscitation efforts. It's done, and then I just look down, and that baby just looks like it's sleeping like a little doll, and it just always just like, man, it sticks with me. So I do agree with you. I do think it's a little bit harder to see some of the older ones. It's all terrible, but I understand what you're saying, where you're coming from.
Ryan, you went to nursing school at a slightly older age than a lot of our young nursing grads, who many times they go to college, they go right to nursing school, and they're working in our ED and they're 23. just barely outside of being a kid. I have a 22-year-old. I still call him a kid, and he doesn't like it. I actually call him I used to call him my little guy, and he said to me once when he was like 20, he said, "Dad, don't call me that anymore." So I had to stop calling him my little guy. But at this point in your career, do you also take the time to look around the room and see who's not doing well? And are you supporting other team members who are younger and have less experience with seeing difficult situations?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that was incredibly familiar to me coming here from the military. Now, again, the language is very, very different, but that checking on you, hey buddy, are you okay? Hey, what's going on, man? We're phenomenal about that, from the doctor all the way down to the tech. Everyone in that room, I always see people like, you okay? And I know if it's some of our new nurses, I've seen them. I've seen multiple people break down. I mean, I've had to walk into the closet and break down myself at work before. I've seen it. I always make sure that we're checking on them. Our team leaders are great about doing that too. They know if we have newer ones in there, it's their first time on the chest, which that means first time doing compressions, or it's their first time to be in there to see. It's a lot. And what's kind of crazy about it too is you can come and be a nurse for a few months and actually get a lot of experience before you experience that. And I've watched it break some people. They're just like, absolutely not. I can't ever do this again. And that's a hard thing to see too, because it does take it takes a special heart, a special mind. That's not beefing us up at all. I have so much admiration for my coworkers, the doctors, and everyone that they come in there every day. We show up, and no matter what we got going on, we give everything we can to take care of people. So that is one thing that's really cool about Children's, is the teamwork, the camaraderie. I call it trauma bonding. We all bond, and we become close, whether not even outside of work. It blows my mind that these are people that I have no idea what they do outside, but when I see them at work, I know who that is. That's my person. That's my friend, and we can connect and talk, and then we go our separate ways, and then we keep coming back and doing it. I think it's pretty interesting how that human interaction works. But I do see it a lot in the younger generation. It is hard to see, but I respect them a lot too, because most of them, they show some resiliency. They push through, they keep coming back, and they want that experience, and they want to get better. And I've had them come up to me and be like, hey, what could I have done better? On that IV, what could I have done different? And I respect that a lot. I think it's phenomenal to see them kind of become more determined to be better next time.
1 out of 50, or I think it's about that number, or 2 out of 100 children we actually are able to get resuscitate back. So the vast majority of children do not make it, and part of the job is to keep getting better. You had said something, and a couple things to follow up on, that was really interesting. One is we have all these interactions, and you could have all these interactions in a day, and I want to just name what you said. So obviously, when you're at home with your kids, you're a dad, and you have a partner, and you're managing your life, right? So everyone has that going on, and then everyone has these coworker relationships where there's, in the ER, it's random, right? Ish, where any given day the team is slightly different with different people. We know each other, but it's always a little bit different, and you're on shift, you're there, the nurses have different hours than the physicians do, and people are coming and going, but we're all there. And then you describe this, and that's a relationship, right, with the coworkers. And then you described this other situation with that dad in the first story, whereas we have interactions with random people on a day-to-day basis, like really random, and many of them, and we have to figure it out. And some of these situations are really impossible. And I've never really thought about that paradigm, but in an 18-hour, when you're awake, or 16 hours, whatever, how much sleep you get, you could be having all of these relational experiences with people, and they're really, really different in so many different ways. But you had also mentioned, because you have such a unique background, you had mentioned that the military it's just a different culture around seeing a bad event happening versus what happens in a civilian children's hospital. Can you talk a little bit about that and your perspectives around that?
Well, kind of a decent example. Just imagine we're working a code, a pediatric, code event where we're doing CPR and stuff. And then there's people that have guns and are shooting at you. So the the reaction and the way that you respond to that is very different, and the way you train is very different. And it's very, I mean, it's again, it's controlled chaos, which is something I know you're very familiar with because a lot of times in those it's chaos, but you're looking to your left or right, or you're moving to cover, or you're taking cover, or you're trying to identify where something's coming from. It's more of an open kind of trauma experience versus we in general, for the most part, we should be safe in our room. We're in a specific location, close proximity, whereas there could be situations where I'm 20, 30, 40, 50 feet away from my fellow Marine, or a few hundred yards behind, or the it's a very different kind of speed too, because things definitely blur, and the lines get pretty wild, and all that training too. The way you just train consistently. It's like we do too. But in my time, I put hundreds of thousands of rounds down range, tons of repetitions. To this day, right now, I could break down an M4, put it back together, go out and do what I got to do, and still remember it because it just became muscle memory, and that's unique to us too. Simple skills like starting IVs, intubating, those are muscle memory things that we can just do without even thinking about it. So I feel like there's tremendous similarities, but I feel like in the military, it's just more open. You could be in a whole town or city versus our little, I like to call it kind of like, I guess the term, our little safe room, in a sense, where we have everybody right there. It's a lot more out and open and expanded. So,
But what is the difference when there's a bad event in the field in the military versus a bad event that happens when a child dies? Is there any kind of comparison around that? Like when you see a friend or a partner pass from being injured, or if they're injured, I'm imagining in the military, and it's just imagining that you just have to also keep going.
you're alone. If someone's injured, we're going to try to secure, get them behind cover, try to secure the area that we can, call in a medevac. Medevac will come in. Hopefully those guys can get in there and get them out, and then we turn around and we keep fighting. And you've got to block it out and not think about it and just do your best, because you don't want to become another target, and you don't want your buddy next to you to become another target. So that's kind of the big difference here. At least with us, we can all turn around and look at each other and talk and kind of decompress and like, hey, this is what happened. We do our, which we do the same thing. We'll do after action reports or after action reviews and stuff like that. We do that a lot in training in the military, but we do the same thing in the code where we'll all, we'll wait, give it a few hours, then bring everybody that's still there from the team in, and we'll kind of talk about it. Hey, how'd it go? How's everybody feeling? How's everybody doing? Which is something I think is very, very important that we do, because a lot of times that's when I've been able to look across the room and see somebody that was really struggling with the situation.
Yes, it's a little bit pro forma these days in the debriefing, but to me the most important part of the debriefing is exactly what you said, is you bring the team in, and for me it's about checking in with my teammates and seeing who is affected and who's not affected. Because I'm at the point of my career where my heart rate, good and bad, does not go up that much during these events, but I'm looking around the room and seeing who's with me and who's really struggling. And, at this point in your career and in my career, part of our job is teaching and training the next generation of nurse and physician in the crazy world that we live in. Well, Ryan, it's been an incredible pleasure. Every single time I hear a story, it really gets me excited about this journey that we're on around human medicine. And every single time I've had a guest on, I've gotten to know them in a different way, and I've gotten to know this beautiful side of who you are. And I couldn't be more proud and honored to work with you. And I have no doubt in your career that you are going to, I think you're a grower and a learner. And I think that you are already a master in the healthcare world. And I think many people in the ED really look up to you. And I think there's so much potential for you to grow within the context of nursing. And I'm a big Ryan fan, and thanks for just being vulnerable and sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for the team, and I'm glad I get to be a part of it. I appreciate your time. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for those that are listening today. And this is HuMed with David Spiro. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and subscribe. Join the journey with me, and we'll see where it takes us. But Ryan, thanks again, and also a quick shout out to Ty King, our awesome editor. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for listening to HuMed with David Spiro, MD. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. The video versions are also available on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell there so that you never miss a future episode.